What do you believe right now that's making you feel this way? And when you analyse it, you realise how irrational you can be at times.
Every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
It's not sales per se, but the outcome of it is, because people get to know you, they get to see you.
But, you know, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development programme I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated. Yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews, and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so, into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer, or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk. Boy, do I love the variety of guests that I have the privilege of interviewing on ScaleUp Radio. It's not exactly rocket science what we do, but that's exactly what my next guest is. Essentially, he is a rocket scientist. So I interviewed Dr. Rajan Bedi, who is the CEO and founder of his company called Space Chips, and they develop space electronics. So electronics, chips, devices, technology that goes up into space in satellites and does all sorts of great things like doing ground observation or Earth observation for things like food sustainability and even things like illegal fishing. So all sorts of different applications that you can imagine. And of course, there's all sorts of complications around designing things that have to go into space. And we talk about some of those, as well as the business aspects of the journey that he has been on, from starting about 9 years ago after a 25-year experience in the space industry, but then deciding to go out on his own, and some of the lessons that he's learnt along the way, the milestones, including at one point then investing £500,000 in setting up a lab in the UK. But it is a fascinating discussion, and I think you are going to find it as equally fascinating as I did. So let's go across to Rajan for the rest of his story. Well, welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. I'm here this afternoon with Dr. Rajan Bedi, who is the CEO and founder of Space Chips. So, Dr. Rajan, welcome to ScaleUp Radio.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. So, Space Chips, what's that all about?
Well, let me give you some background first, Kevin. When I was a child, we used to live on the edge of town, and we used to get mesmerizing views of the constellations. And, you know, as a young child, I was just captivated by, the night skies. And for me, at the age of 5, I knew then that I wanted to spend my career working in space technology, working in the space industry in some way. And I always wondered as a child, could we use space technology to sort of help people and to make our world a safer and happier place? Mm-hmm. And so almost 9 years ago, I've been working in the global space industry now for almost 25 years. But almost 9 years ago, I took this crazy decision to sort of start up my own company.
Yeah.
Always wanted to have a go, was never quite courageous enough. And I sort of got to that stage in life thinking, I may not get a chance, another chance. So now is the time to give it a go. If it doesn't work out, then so be it. But at least I'll have given it a shot.
Yeah.
And here we are, almost 9 years later, with a little bit less hair, with a few more wrinkles. but the company is doing okay. And basically what we do is, so I've invented some space electronics, and the company is currently bringing to market, or bringing to orbit, should I say,
Brilliant.
space electronics that are being used to address some very major societal challenges. So, for example, if you take food sustainability, just before Christmas, global population peaked at 8 billion. Right. By the year 2050, global population will increase to 10 billion. So to go from 8 billion to 10 billion, you actually need to increase food production by 70%.
Right.
And as you go from 8 billion to 10 billion, the amount of land available to grow food decreases. So for example, what we can do is we use space technology to remotely monitor the quality of crops in fields in order to maximize yields. So sort of remotely, we can take photographs and we can then sort of say to the farmer that this particular area of the field needs some attention. It may need some growth. It may need some water, some fertilizer. So that's one example of the space electronics that we develop, and that's called Earth observation.
Okay.
And so there are other things such as, for example, also related to food sustainability. Today, 20% of all fish which is caught is fished illegally.
Right.
Yet 1 billion people on our planet rely on fish as their primary source of protein. So we have developed and are developing very sophisticated space electronics that will allow the authorities to monitor suspicious fishing behavior, both night and day, irregardless of whether there's cloud cover. So there's lots of advanced electronics going on behind the scenes. Other examples are, for example, we all have mobile phones and portable devices and sort of electric cars. Those require lithium batteries, and the global supply of lithium is running out. So many decades ago, humans would prospect by, for example, they may find a chunk of gold somewhere, and they sort of tell their friends, look, I found some gold here, and they'd all sort of turn up with their sort of shovels and spades and start digging.
Yeah.
Some of these mines are in very sort of inaccessible, inhospitable places. But today we can do prospecting intelligently by using orbiting satellites fitted with special sensors. They can take remote measurements of the geology, and by doing some analysis, they can actually quite precisely pinpoint which precious metals can be found where. So it's a much more intelligent way of prospecting, and it's a much more sustainable and eco-friendly way of sort of mining. And even during COVID, for example, space technology was used to provide telemedicine. We couldn't go into our doctor's surgeries. We had to social distance. So, many surgeries used satellite technology to sort of conduct their Zoom calls or whatever else.
Yeah.
And then hospitals sort of used satellite navigation to precisely position drones to disinfect wards and so on, and to ensure that key workers commuted to work using routes that had sort of the lowest infection rates.
Okay.
So space and technology, everybody thinks of things like telecommunication satellites, which provide global communication, or sat-nav, for example. But today, space technology is becoming ubiquitous, and it's impacting almost every aspect of our life.
So who are your customers? Who actually commissions you and buys your services?
My company does 6 things, and I suppose your question fits in very nicely with the topic of growing and scaling a business.
Mm-hmm.
When I founded my company back in 2014, I sort of knew what the industry was doing well, and I had some ideas of what, as an industry, we weren't doing well. So I wanted to be different, and I wanted to add value, but I wanted to add value throughout the supply chain. So, for example, so we have customers who are, so for example, they develop and they supply components to the space industry. So we offer them technical marketing and business intelligence services.
Okay.
And then we take those components and we develop subsystems. And we then sell those subsystems to satellite manufacturers.
Okay.
So that's another customer type we have. And then those OEMs, they will then deliver those subsystems or working spacecraft to an operator. So we have operators who are customers of ours as well. And for example, some of these companies may be funded by VCs and banks, and we provide them certain specialist services as well. So that was one of the niches that I identified when I started my company, that there was an opportunity here in the marketplace to actually work throughout the supply chain, and offer value to all of these stakeholders.
Very good. So what sort of stage is the business at?
Well, at the moment, the company is incredibly busy. We are developing and bringing to products our next inventions. Some of the early products, they've used traditional methods of, let's say, onboard computation and signal processing. But what we are doing now is with the next generation, we are incorporating in-orbit artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means, so one simple example is, a lot of satellites are used for the purpose of Earth observation. So we monitor climate change, we can monitor weather, we can, part of disaster management, for example,
right.
If we have a volcano or a tsunami and there's been huge destruction, we can tell the first responders this is where they need to go. But what's happening now is the sensors are becoming so sophisticated, and they generate huge amounts of data. So typically that data was downlinked to the ground, post-processed, and decisions were then taken. But what's happening now is, because so much data is being acquired, you're actually clogging the RF links, downlinks back to the ground. So one of the incentives is to do more and more processing on board the spacecraft in an intelligent way. Mm-hmm. And some applications require real-time decision-making, and only downlink the results. So I'll give you one very simple example. Last summer here in the UK, we had wildfires in the centre of London. During that week, where the temperature sort of peaked at, let's say, around 40 degrees, in the centre of London, we had wildfires. And at the moment, the annual cost to extinguish wildfires in the UK is about £55 million. And because of climate change, the Met Office is predicting that wildfires will increase by 50%. Mm-hmm. Now, let me share some really scary numbers with you.
Okay.
In 2021, the financial cost to extinguish wildfires in the United States was $4 billion. But that's simply the cost to put the fires out.
Yep.
The actual cost to repair infrastructure, to sort of reinvigorate local communities, the sort of insurance and so costs actually came to $200 billion, which is a huge amount of money.
Absolutely.
And so today we are using space technology to do things like wildfire detection. This is where you are taking you're gathering lots of sensor information, but you need decisions to be taken in real time rather than downlinked to the ground for post-processing. So we can use artificial intelligence to make these very sort of rapid decisions in real time, and then downlink the results as soon as possible. And that sort of saves lives. It saves destruction to property and infrastructure and so on.
So how do you make money? What's the business model?
Okay, so firstly, when I set up the company, I wanted to work throughout the supply chain. So in terms of how the company makes money, firstly, we sell our inventions, we sell our products.
Yep.
That's number one. Number two, we have a design consultancy services. And that means that can be something as simple as providing advice on, for example, to a space company who wants to know what components they should use in the next spacecraft, or it could be as complex as they will say, please design and deliver this avionics for us. Okay.
Right.
And just to give you an idea, we have delivered over 200 orders to 70 clients in 25 countries across 19 time zones.
Wow.
Thank you. I'm very pleased with that statistic. You know, that's more countries than many airlines fly to.
Yeah. And how many's in your team then?
We are tiny. We're just a micro SME. You know, if you sort of add the company, if you add the subcontractors, if you add our agents, we have various agents around the world, and you can count us all in two hands.
Right.
We are a micro SME, but we punch above our weight, and we sort of leverage our sort of global networks in order to punch above our weight.
Yeah.
So we have our products, we have our design consultancy services.
Yep.
Then we have something called training.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, when I set up my company, I'd never intended to offer training. What happened was in 2013, I like writing. So I started a blog on space technology in 2013. And even to this date, it's the only blog in the world on this topic. And it's become very popular. It gets read around sort of 20,000 times every month. You know, I'm not talking about cooking or gardening or sex. It's space technology, and you know, to get 20,000.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what happened was, you know, a lot of people said, you know, why don't you start offering training? You know, when I set up the company, you know, finances were quite limited, and I needed to generate revenue to fund the R&D.
Mm.
And I also realized there was a niche in the marketplace. Nobody else in the world offered this training. So our training department is actually branded as courses for rocket scientists.
Yeah.
And you know, we have taught 700 people in 16 countries. That's almost 60 companies and 8 space agencies. And you know, I was in Australia last October, and you know, I taught Australian space companies, and you know, it's quite cool when people like NASA or the European Space Agency give you a call and say, "Look, can you teach our staff?"
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's so that's the third service we offer is training services. It's our training courses are very unique. You know, we don't teach you how to use Microsoft Word. You know, we teach you how to design spacecraft and space electronics, and people love our courses. And you know, we got to see the world, I suppose, and They sort of funded the R&D in some respects, and then and then we have two services specifically for technology providers to the space industry. Okay, so these are companies who provide components or technologies.
Yeah.
And what we do for them is, so let's say, for example, Kevin, you are a technology provider.
Mm-hmm.
So we can provide you with business intelligence. So that means we will answer questions such as, who in the space industry would buy your technology? Why would they want it? Where would they use it? How would they use it? And when would they need it? So we'd sort of identify your sort of target customers and the target use cases.
Yeah.
And that's always a very fascinating part of the business. And what we've discovered is not only have we secured business from technology providers, but banks and VCs come to us, and they'll say to us, "Look, we're thinking of buying this space company.
Okay. Yeah.
Could you do some due diligence on whether you think they are a sort of a sound investment?"
Mm-hmm.
And never intended to work with them, but they came knocking at our door,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been interesting. And then the other thing we do is for technology providers, we do technical marketing. So we help position technology providers as the go-to supplier. We help them increase their market share and global sales around the world. And we do that through sort of PR campaigns, very focused articles, technical marketing articles, or sort of PR events. And so it all goes back to one of my original concepts of when I founded the company. I wanted to deliver value throughout the supply chain.
Yeah. So that's quite a mix and a range of services there. So what makes up sort of 80% of what's the majority of your income? Where does that come from?
The majority of the income would be design consultancy services and product sales.
Yeah. So they're the two main ones. Excellent. So, fascinating industry. And what clearly it takes a lot of technical expertise to win in this space. What would you say are the primary things that you need to be able to be successful in your field?
Well, firstly, regardless of whether we are in the space industry or if we're selling washing machines, for example, space companies, we have to follow the fundamental rules of business,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, marketing and strategy and things like this. So there's obviously this common set of sort of business acumen and business rules. But in the case of spaceships, we are a highly technical company. And there's a lot of specialist knowledge. We never stop learning. We learn every day technically, try to become better every day. And sometimes it's difficult. We're bombarded with so much new information. Technology never stops.
Yeah.
We're always trying to innovate, always trying to deliver more value to our customers.
Yeah. Good. And what if I'm designing a component, a chip or whatever it might be, what extra requirements do I need if I'm thinking about it going into space?
Okay, that's a great question. So if you take your television, for example, or your mobile phone, they operate on the ground in a relatively benign environment. If you have some, space electronics sort of orbiting Earth, within the spacecraft, the side of the spacecraft that faces the sun could be exposed to temperatures of plus 200 degrees C. And the opposite side, which faces deep space, could be exposed to temperatures down to minus 200 degrees C.
Right.
So there's a lot of plumbing involved to ensure. So firstly, the space electronics has to work over a much wider temperature range compared to, let's say, your television, and there's much more emphasis on reliability. If your mobile phone breaks down, it's inconvenient. You can go to the high street and get it replaced. But if you've got a satellite orbiting sort of 22,000 miles that way.
Yeah.
It's inaccessible. So there's much more emphasis on reliability. If something does go wrong, there's a lot of engineering to ensure that any failure doesn't propagate, and it's sort of restricted to sort of just that place.
Okay. And presumably some of these components are up in orbit for years, are they?
Oh yes, you come up. Well, yes. So firstly, there's another major difference as well. Electronics that we use here on the ground are protected and shielded by the Earth's atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
When you're orbiting Earth, you're outside the atmosphere, so you're exposed to quite damaging radiation from the sun.
Yep.
So we have to design and develop our electronics to tolerate the harsh radiation from the sun. So it's a very harsh environment, both in terms of temperature and radioactivity, that our electronics must withstand.
Yeah, I was just observing that presumably they're up there for a long period of time as well, several years potentially.
Well, we have customers. We've got one customer. He lives up there for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, he doesn't care.
Right.
And then we have other customers who live up there for 18 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So that gives you an idea in terms of the reliability spectrum, let's call it. So the customer who lives up there for 18 years, they may be a telecommunications operator. So once they launch their satellite, they'll switch it on and they'll never ever want to switch it off, because every second that payload or that spacecraft is off, they are not generating revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that just gives you an appreciation of the economics of that type of customer.
Mm.
And that type of customer will pay a premium for high reliability electronics. That type of customer will pay $100,000 for one microchip.
Wow.
Okay? Whereas our other client at the opposite end of the spectrum, he might pay $1 or $5 for some of his components because he only lives up there for 2 weeks. Okay. Now he came to us about 4 years ago and he said, "Look, I want to double my mission life from 2 weeks to 4 weeks." And so we showed him how to double his mission life. His issue was his payload worked from batteries.
Okay.
And so we gave him some techniques of how he could reduce the current draw from the battery, and we showed him how to sort of double his mission life from 2 weeks to 4 weeks.
Okay, and that advice, I imagine, is worth a tremendous amount of money to that person.
Yes, and that would have been delivered as part of our consultancy services.
Yeah, good. Well, absolutely. Well, mind-boggling and literally, literally rocket scientist stuff. So, tell me about some of the lessons that you've learned, some of the milestones maybe along the way. So you started sort of nine years ago, and you learned fairly quickly that you needed to get the cash in to fund some of the R&D. So you did, yeah. So you're looking along the value chain. So what are some of the milestones along the way?
Well, firstly, when you start any new company, it's really difficult. And on the very first day of trading, that was back in September 2014, we had two significant milestones on the very first day. Okay. We signed contracts with two US companies. The total value of those contracts was $50,000. And, I was very nervous about starting the company, but that gave me some confidence on day one.
Yeah.
It also gave me some cash to sort of then to do things with and to start investing. So that's always a milestone I never forget.
Yeah.
We actually made 2 sales on the very first day.
Excellent.
And then as we started to roll out the services, the very first training that I delivered was in Tel Aviv in 2015. and then that part of the business started to take off. That was also very interesting, very exciting, and the training part of the business serves other purposes. It positions us as the sort of technical specialist, and we actually secure a lot of consultancy business as a result of the training. And that's another reason why I set up the training part of the business.
Yeah.
Other milestones were, for example, getting prototypes of the first inventions. It's always very exciting when you have your product in your hand. And we were very, it was very nice. The inventions won some very nice awards back in sort of 2017, 2018, and 2019.
And a number of those are around that reliability, aren't they, that you were talking about?
Yes, and it's nice. It gives the business a little bit of credibility.
Yeah.
Another key milestone. This was a really scary one when we set up the lab. To go from being a services company to a products and services company. So I'm very proud to say, we are a British company. All our research is done in the UK. All our design and development is done in the UK. All our assembly, all our manufacturing, and all our testing is done in the UK.
Great.
And I'm really very happy about that. But it was a huge investment. You can only but imagine how expensive the equipment is to test this sort of stuff, and to sign off £500,000 to set up a lab. That was not an easy decision for me. £500,000.
Absolutely.
Regardless of the size of a company, is a lot of money.
Yeah. And how did you raise the money for that? A combination of income from our existing services and products. Yeah. Our training brought in a lot of income. Our other services brought in substantial income, but we had to take out a loan as well. And HSBC was very, very excited that they were working with us, and they made a very nice corporate video. And there's some pictures of the lab in the corporate video, and so it was because what used to happen, Kevin, was prior to setting up the lab, we would borrow test equipment from some of our customers who are test equipment providers. Okay.
And there's there's a lot of goodwill. At a personal level, I've known them for almost 25 years. And I suppose that's another key lesson of running a business is to sort of always engage and sort of work with your sort of network, your wider network. And I have to say, these suppliers were always very generous. Every time I wanted some equipment, they would loan it to me. And in fact, I have an arrangement with one of them. When I'm delivering the training, wherever I go in the world, huge metal suitcases arrive with some of their equipment, which we actually demonstrate on our training courses. But there comes a stage where you cannot keep asking. Where you actually need the equipment now to do some testing, and rather than wait 2 weeks for it to arrive. So we needed to make this investment. It was I'm very happy we made the investment, but it still keeps me awake at night sometimes that we've spent £500,000 on some very expensive, very sexy looking kit, but we have to ensure it pays for itself.
Yeah. Yeah, so exactly. Now taking yourself on a big fixed asset that you've got to sweat, essentially. And so how's that working out?
Yes, it's fine. It's whenever we want to do testing, we no longer have to wait or call anybody. We just go into the lab, we get the results straight away. And I suppose that's another lesson in terms of growing a business. And that is, never be afraid to fail. Fail forwards. And one of the things I would say is always be experimenting and prototyping, particularly in our case, because we develop and manufacture products. Before you're selling those to customers, don't be afraid to fail. Okay, and keep tweaking and keep experimenting and become better with the processes of R&D and design and development. Because when you do get the customer order, they want it yesterday, and that's not a time to be learning. That is the time to be delivering.
And by having that lab of your own, has that separated you from your competitors? I mean, I haven't really asked you about your competition, but has that given you a competitive advantage by being able to do your own work in your own lab?
Well, it's allowed us to do things quickly. It's allowed us to, we are a micro SME. Okay, there are competitors out there around the world who employ almost 50, 60, 70,000 staff. Okay, so we can never compete with them. And really, I don't have any aspirations to compete with them. But we have identified our niches. We serve our customers well in those market niches. And because of our size, we are nimble, we are agile, but we know what we can and cannot do. And we sort of play to our strengths. And we've identified certain gaps, for example, within the supply chain, and for the last 9 years, we've been sort of delivering value and fulfilling those market gaps.
Excellent. And you won in 2022. I think you won Great British Entrepreneur Award for Disruptor of the Year, I believe. What were the main aspects of that meant you won that award?
I suppose it was the disruptive nature of our business model, the fact that we work throughout the supply chain, and we have many diverse customer types. Our products themselves are different and disruptive. They do things differently at a sort of fundamental and technical level. When I set up my company, I wanted to do things a little bit differently. I realized then that there was space in the market to deliver values in a slightly different way and in a more efficient way. If you go back, let's say 15 years, the space industry had a bad reputation of sort of constantly delivering late and over budget.
Right.
And I experienced that in my past as well. But I also realized there were ways to correct this. And when I set up my company 9 years ago, the global space industry was changing. It was going from being institutionalized to much more commercial. And in fact, only last week, the latest UK figures were shared. Today in the UK, we contribute £17 billion annually to the UK economy. We employ, I think 1,600 companies employ almost 50,000 highly skilled people in the UK. And that just gives you an idea of the breadth and growth of the UK space industry. And I think back in 2019, Morgan Stanley predicted that the global space industry would be valued at $4 trillion by the year 2030. And that sort of validated my choice to start up a company. I thought, well, okay, this is a great prediction. It's a big number. I can contribute something to this industry and hopefully get a small slice of that pie.
Yeah, good. So sounds like you've made a lot of great decisions. What do you think some of the key good decisions, things you've got right over those 9 years are? What are some of the key things?
I think sort of growing the design consultancy part of the business.
Right.
That has really really sort of made the company a global company. We'll do projects that perhaps other people may not want to consider. And that's because we believe we have the expertise to deliver those projects. So growing and developing that part of the business was a key priority for me. I think also rolling out the training part of the business. In fact, I'd never even considered training when I set up my company.
Yeah.
But to have taught 700 space professionals in 16 countries, it sort of says it all, really.
Yeah.
I think one of the most difficult decisions actually has been bringing to market the product inventions, because that is not that requires huge investment, like the lab, for example.
Yeah.
It can be hugely time consuming. I'll give you one example. The first piece of hardware we got back didn't actually work, and it sucked every ounce of energy out of me. It consumed huge amounts of time to actually understand why the hardware didn't work. And it cost a lot of money. We actually had to get some additional test equipment, which was not planned in the budget. But it all goes back to what I say: fail forward and never stop experimenting and prototyping. But those 2 months, Kevin, were really, really difficult. They were dark months,
right?
And I'm not afraid to say this. I cried many times,
right?
And because I actually thought, because that's the part of the company that excites me the most, because these are my inventions, and I felt as if I'd failed. I felt like a failure. I felt that my ideas were wrong, and in the end, we fixed the problems. They were just sort of little errors that had creeped into the manufacturing process. So the actual fundamental design and the R&D is okay, but when you make things, initially you have teething problems, and it was just sort of these sort of teething issues.
Very good. So yeah, I can imagine that, and thank you for sharing that. I can imagine that must have been a pretty dark time. So what are some of the things that, with hindsight, you might have done differently?
It's when you listen to all these sort of business experts and gurus and so on, there's a lot of content about getting new leads and things like this, but it's very important to look after your existing customers. Okay, to my credit, I have done this from day one. Looking after your existing customers and delivering value to them, in my opinion, is a very key part of growing a business.
Yeah.
I suppose if I look back, there are a few things I would have done differently. I could have accessed more funding at the start,
right?
And that would have really jump-started the company. Some of the strategies that my company employed at the very start in terms of securing external finance, when I look back on it, I think actually that was not so clever.
Right.
But the other thing is, fundamentally we are engineers, right? Mm-hmm. Engineers are never taught how to sell. We are taught how to engineer. We are taught how to design and develop. And, fundamental business skills, how to sell, how to close a deal, how to get a lead. All of this we learned from day one. And in hindsight, if we had been better at that at the start, then I think we could have grown more quickly.
Okay, good. No, that's yeah, and understand that. That's really good. And on that side of things, what about the people? Because I can only imagine it must be quite hard to find the right kind of people that have got the expertise you need, but also the fit for what you're doing. What sort of lessons have you learned along the way about the people side?
It is finding good people. Now, I have to say, in my own case, I get bombarded once a week with people wanting to come and work at Spaceships.
Right.
I think because for two reasons, my blog has become very popular within my industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I do use that to sort of showcase the latest technology and some of the things we do. And secondly, my profile is quite active on LinkedIn. So it generates a lot of publicity, a lot of PR. And I suppose in one way, it attracts a lot of potential employees.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's never easy finding people with the right skills, with the right fit, with the right attitude. But these are common problems to most companies and most industries. Perhaps in our industry, our knowledge perhaps is a little bit more specialist.
Yeah. You clearly, from the age of 5, you've had a passion for space and the good that it can that perhaps we can do through putting things into space. What's the legacy that you want to leave?
Well, I suppose that our products and services did some good for mankind. We contributed space-based solutions that help to contribute answers to some of the key societal issues we have today in terms of how to monitor and manage climate change, in terms of food sustainability, providing sort of global internet to everyone in the world. Up until I think 2 years ago, 40% of the world's population didn't have access to broadband internet. Mm-hmm. That only fuels sort of poverty and illiteracy, and these were the thoughts. Well, when I was 5 years old, the thought which occurred to me was, could space technology be used in some way to help people and help humanity? And it's great to see that space technology and space applications are now being used in so many diverse areas by everyone. And they may not be aware they're using space technology, but it's become a ubiquitous technology that is benefiting everyone.
Excellent. And if we're, what's the next stage of development for Spaceships? If we're sitting here in 5 years' time, what do you want to have happened to consider those 5 years a success?
Well, I'd want to see our latest inventions flying in orbit and contributing solutions to some of these sort of societal problems. What we're going to bring to market is very exciting. In terms of performance and horsepower and overall capability, and we are entering a new space age. Man is going to return to the moon next year. There'll be humans on Mars, and it's a huge, vibrant industry, and. But the key thing for Spaceships is we want to see our products up there and doing good things.
Okay. Have you got any aspirations to go into space yourself?
No, I never had the constitution, Kevin. When I was a young child, I always got a bit queasy, even going on the roller coaster, and right. So it's I never had the stomach for it. But I was always more interested in the sort of underlying technology.
Yeah, very good. So what do you think, Swina, what are your biggest challenges going forwards, do you think?
Bringing products to market is not easy. One of the big challenges is getting our products right first time. And we, as I say, we are micro SME. We have limited budgets. We have to get our R&D right first time. 20 years ago, if you didn't get it right first time, you could maybe have a second chance. But today, time to market pressures are so severe. We have to get these things right first time. And that example I shared with you, where the first product that we built, that really showed me the impact it had on the company. Because it didn't work, but we learn from that, and we become better as a result of that. And there are many things we'd like to do.
Good. And what's your, are you planning on running spaceships for till you retire, or have you got have you got an exit plan?
Not yet. I think it's probably the former. I'll run it until I retire, or until it's sort of. It's running a company is not easy. It's very exciting. It's very cool, and running a space company is an even cooler thing to do. But it's not easy. I start work at 5 every morning. And sometimes, in fact, most evenings I don't finish until 9 p.m. And then I just collapse into bed.
Yeah.
It involves being an entrepreneur involves making many sacrifices, as you know.
Yeah.
So it's I try to look after my health as best I can to ensure I'm here, in the long term.
Yeah, and with your product, does that bring in a sort of a licensing, recurring revenue type model as well?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
So because a lot of what you do with the other sides are one-off project type things, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay, great, good. So are you okay if we have a couple of quick fire questions to round it up?
Go ahead.
Brilliant. So if you were to go back to your younger self, you can pick whenever you like, but what advice would you give yourself?
Start your company sooner.
Right. Yeah. Good stuff. And any books, podcasts, other resources that have made a difference to you that you'd recommend to others?
Oh, it's, I sort of, when I have time, I do listen to sort of these sort of management and leadership people like Robin Sharma. There are a few others. There's an Indian guy, Raj Taluja.
Okay.
I like his content. Then there's a Canadian guy, Dan Locke. I like his stuff as well. It's some of it you've got to take with a pinch of salt, but some of it is very helpful, very valuable, and I've learned from all these great people.
Very good, excellent. Are you? You're in the space tech, the high tech world. Are there any apps that you'd recommend or bits of software that maybe you've got on your phone that you know?
When it comes to things like this, I am simple and boring, and my phone is, it has the apps that were pre-installed.
Yeah.
I think I've got the British Airways app. I've got the EasyJet app. I've got one music app. I think that's it. It's because I like simplicity, and my daughters, they've got tons of stuff on their phone, and they showed me their phone once, and I simply couldn't use it. I just handed it back. I'm a simple sort of guy.
Brilliant. I love that. So who's had the most influence on you, would you say?
Who's had the most influence on me? That's a very difficult question, and it's, to be honest, I don't really have an answer for you. Okay. There are many people within our industry who I admire.
Yeah.
And there are many leaders and entrepreneurs in different industries who I admire. So, for example, I've just shared with you some leaders. No, I am a fan of Elon Musk. Well, for his engineering endeavors, anyhow. But you know, I like the world of business. I like observing how other entrepreneurs operate because we can all learn from one another. So I don't really have any, I cannot sort of pinpoint one or two people. I sort of, when I have time, I listen, I observe, and I take the best bits.
Brilliant. Okay. And then finally for these questions, really, in terms of, I always like to ask people what their most successful marketing strategy or tactic is. So, what in your world, what works for you?
Look, it's not about the product. Okay. It's about, in fact, what I've discovered is people want you to solve their problems. Yeah. And fundamentally, if you can solve your customer's problem, then there's a high probability you will win that business. Either you solve their problem, or if you can show them what transformation will become as a result of engaging with us. It's in terms of marketing. These are the sort of things that work. We'll never say, for example, come to us and buy our product or service because we're the best thing since sliced bread. That's never going to work. And in our marketing, what we find is people don't really care. What people want is for you to help them solve their issues.
Brilliant. Good. Well, Dr. Rajan, it's been absolutely fascinating talking with you, and a lot of it's way over my head. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much for coming. If people would like to get hold of you or find out more about Space Chips, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way is to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Super. Dr. Rajan Bedi, thank you very much for being my guest on ScaleUp Radio.
You're very welcome, Kevin. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.